Hello and welcome to BartenderHQ.com podcast number 13. On this week's show, Wetherspoons ending their contract with Heineken, surviving the holiday season behind the bar, creating a practice environment for your Flair, and the Rusty Nail cocktail, and ending up with our usual Tips for Tips segment. So let's get on with the show.
Welcome to the BartenderHQ.com podcast. Find us on Facebook and Twitter at Bartender HQ. Here's your host, David Eden-Sangwell.
Now, this first section is really a bit of news for any of our guys that are watching from the UK, and this is something that got announced on Tuesday, that Wetherspoons, which is one of the biggest pub companies in the UK, they've got around about 950 pubs, have ended their contract with Heineken, which means they're no longer stocking any Heineken products. Now that includes Heineken beer itself, Murphy's, which is an Irish stout, Foster's, Strongbow, which are some of the big sellers over in the UK. Now the reason behind this, as far as we can tell, is that Heineken in Ireland, Wetherspoons are opening their first few bars in Ireland, their first few pubs, and they've got quite a few planned over there. The first one they've opened is called the Black Rock. It was a really successful opening, very popular, and their second opening, which, and I'm going to butcher the name of this place, the Drambuie, is, that's where their next pub was going to open. And although at the Black Rock, Heineken, which is the best-selling lager, and they also own a lot of other beers and brands over in Ireland, they have refused to supply this pub with their beers, including Murphy's, which is the main alternative to Guinness. Now, Guinness isn't sold by Wetherspoons in Ireland. This is from a previous issue that they've had over there, where they've basically, it seems that Guinness have refused to sell Wetherspoons the Guinness at the same sort of price that they get it for in the UK. They wanted a lot more in Ireland. So Wetherspoons have said, well, no, we'll sell Murphy's, and now Heineken are saying they won't stock the Drambuie with the beers that they need, like Heineken and Murphy's. And we're trying to get them to sign contracts. It seems, from what I've heard, to supply all their other beers, the sort of limited amount that they were able to do. Now, a friend of mine, Stuart Aitken, is a general manager with Wetherspoons. He basically commented on this story on our Facebook page as soon as it broke, with an email that came out from the head office of Wetherspoons. It did say quite clearly on the bottom of there that they were allowed to share it with the general public, so he shouldn't get in any trouble for this, I really hope. But it basically means that all of the Wetherspoons across the UK have stopped selling the Heineken products, as far as I can tell, immediately. And there have been a few different places. This has been trending on Facebook, and everyone seems to know about it. A few different websites have been out to Wetherspoons pubs to try and buy Heineken. Obviously, the pumps are still there, and the taps behind the bar. But from what I can gather, no one's been able to buy any Heineken, because they have just taken it straight off sale. I like the way that Wetherspoons have handled this, to be honest. They've kept it really open and just gone, well, look, this is what's happened, and this is why we're not stocking their stuff anymore. It is going to cause them some problems over Christmas, I would think. It is a very popular beer, Heineken, in the UK and overseas. And, you know, they've got a big chunk of their brands missing now. It won't take them long to get other stuff in. Wetherspoons are very well known as well for their cask ales and that sort of thing. They're very famous for the real ales that they serve, so they shouldn't have any problems keeping the customers coming. They will quite easily get other lagers, and their other beer providers will pretty much up their orders and keep the beer flowing. So if you're heading to a Wetherspoons over Christmas, don't expect Heineken, but there are plenty of other beers there that you can choose from, and you should still have a really good time. So yeah, it's a really weird situation, and the way it broke is a bit crazy, but it seems that Wetherspoons are just standing up to the breweries, and fair play to them. As we start to approach the Christmas season, it is going to get busier for you guys, and as I'm sure you fully know out there as bartenders, but if you're new to bartending, and if this is something that you haven't done before, if it's your first Christmas, there's a few things that you might need to know, and a few tips that can help you to make the most of it and perform at your best, so you can make the most tips possible. Now, I did put out an article a while ago which was called 6 Tips to Get Through the 4-Day Weekend. That was over Easter time, but the majority of these still apply over Christmas time. So, number 1, you need to get enough sleep as a bartender. There's no point being behind the bar like a zombie. I know we all want to go out and have a few drinks and stuff over Christmas because it's our time to celebrate just as much as it is for anyone else. However, we are the ones that need to be on form every night pretty much over the Christmas holidays and over the Christmas break, especially when the office guys start finishing work. People are going to be stressed at your bar because they've been out fighting through people in the shops trying to get those last minute presents in. You need to be on your game. So number 1, make sure you get enough sleep. Number 2, you want to make sure you've eaten something before your meal. Now, I don't mean a huge plate of chips, or what you need is something light that will fuel you throughout your shift. You don't want to be starving hungry. You don't want to be trying to grab garnishes and eat bits and bobs out of the kitchen during your shift. It doesn't help. Make sure you eat a decent meal, nothing too heavy because you don't want to be falling asleep, as I say. See point number 1. But have some food before you start your shift, something light, and it will help you out a lot. Red Bull is not the way to get through these shifts. You know, have a coffee if you need it, but you don't really want to be surviving on energy drinks. Number 3, you need to keep hydrated. Now, energy drinks won't help with that at all. You need water getting into your system. Make sure that you're having plenty of water. Yes, you'll have to keep running off to the loo, but it's better than being dehydrated. Again, that'll make you more tired, and you really, really need to be on your game. Number 4, now this is a bit weird, it's get some exercise, and I know bartenders are notorious for never getting to a gym or anything like that. I used to be just as bad, and I'm slipping back into it, but that's New Year, that's really going to kick in. But even if you can't go to a gym, you don't have to go running or anything like that, but go for a walk when you're off shift, or go to a park, throw some Flair bottles around, do it in the back, do it in your staff room. Just get yourself moving. You need to. When you get yourself moving, you will feel better in yourself, and you'll be performing better behind the bar. Number 5 on this article was to be prepared. So basically, go in a little bit early if you need to. You know it's going to be busy over Christmas, so make sure your station is 100% set. You don't want to be running out of juice, you don't want to be running out of mix, you don't want to run out of garnishes. You guys need to make sure that your station is 100% set, and this is not me talking to you like I'm a manager, this is for your own good. If you are running around looking for garnishes, you are not making tips, and that is what we're all going to work to do, especially over Christmas. There's money to be made, don't waste it by standing there cutting lemons when you should have done that before your shift, or made sure the daytime bartender had done it. And number 6 was actually to stand out with some new drinks. Now, I've got an article on the site called Killer Shooters. It's 6 shooters that you must know, I think is the name of the article. And we'll come back to this actually later on in our tips for tips section. But the more shooters that you know, and I don't mean just shots, I don't mean just pouring a shot of whiskey and that's a shooter. The more shooters that you know, the more stuff you can actively upsell to your customers. And I know, again, it sounds a little bit like a manager's thing. Add on, sell extra stuff. No, the more you can sell to your customers, the more options you give them and go, oh, how do you fancy one of these? How do you fancy this? Would you enjoy one of these? You're giving them options to thank you with a tip. So if they don't want it, they'll say no thanks. That's fine. Move on. Next person. But stand out with some new drinks, and there's plenty on the Bartender HQ website that you can have a look at. They're all free for you to read. Pick a drink that you like if you're able to add in your own drinks. If not, pick something obscure from your menu that you already have in place in your bar, and you'll be able to make more money that way, just by suggesting a drink that people aren't trying. Now, this isn't as much of a feature on this week's show as a little bit of a teaser for something that's coming up in the next few weeks. I've been chatting on email to Brian Webber from the Bartender Journey Podcast. If you guys have been listening to the podcast for a while, you'll remember back in episode 8 when I was chatting to the guys from the Mixology Talk podcast, and we got to have a really good chat about various different things, the sort of stuff that they're doing over on their podcast, and then I guested on their podcast as well, and we had a chat about my background, my time in Dubai, and all the sort of things that they wanted to hear about, because they're not into Flair as much as I am, so we got to sort of swap some ideas and that sort of thing, and hopefully you guys quite enjoyed it. Now, Brian is, it's probably one of the longest running bartending podcasts that's still on iTunes. He's gone down to every other week in general at the moment, because he's got a really busy job now as a food and beverage manager, and we're going to have a chat with him on a show coming up fairly soon, so stay tuned for that. Now, as a lot of you guys will know, I'm quite passionate about Flair bartending, and I don't think there's much else on iTunes that's about Flair bartending, which is one of the reasons that I try and feature it as much as I can and give you guys a few simple tips to try and get you involved in it, because I don't think enough bartenders Flair. Now, one of the things that you need to think about before you get into Flair bartending is where you're going to practice. Now, if you have any outside area at home, if you've got a garden, you've got a yard, anything like that, or you've got a nearby park, they are ideal. I have damaged stuff around the house, not my current house, but my parents' house. By practicing Flair, they had a couple of dents in the fridge, they had a couple of dents in the lounge door when they came back off of a holiday once, so I don't recommend flaring, especially if you're in a rented property or your parents' house or anything like that. Try to avoid flaring indoors, especially if you're learning new stuff. The best thing you can do is prepare yourself somewhere outside to practice, where there's nothing breakable around and you can really go crazy and work on those moves, because don't take your moves to the bar until you've perfected them outside of it. That's my main bugbear, is when you've got a bartender that's behind a bar and flaring and dropping stuff. Now, there's no reason for it. If you're dropping stuff behind the bar, it's because you haven't practiced enough, or you're trying to do stuff that's too hard for you. Just dial it back. Your customers don't mind seeing the easier stuff. They don't know what's easy, they don't know what's hard. But practice before you get out into the bar to perform. And more than that, with this outside area that you're going to practice in, you can make life much easier for yourself. If you can afford it, and you can, if you know where you can get them from, I mean, you can go to our website, have a look on the Bartender Gift Guide. There is a link there to get yourself mixing tins, Flair bottles, any kind of bar equipment that you would need to practice with for Flair, you can actually get at the bartenderhq.com website. We don't stock any of it. You can order it from different places, from Amazon, from eBay, anywhere you want, and I've got some links on there, so if you need to find some, then go over there. If you don't have a budget to get yourself stuff to practice with, it's not a problem. There's also an article on the bartenderhq.com website, I will link to it in the show notes and down there if you're on YouTube, which is my article on exactly how to put together a free Flair practice kit. When I say free, it's 99% free. There's a few things that you might need to pick up if you don't already have them knocking around the house. But it's all very, very cheap, and you can get started on the basics. And one of the things that I mention in that article is, because if you're working in a Flair bar, you'll have bounce mats around your bar to stop anything that hits the ground. Should pretty much bounce then and not break immediately on impact. There is a substitute you can get for your own practice area that's way, way cheaper than buying in the commercial bounce mats, which are around about £80 each, I think, in the UK, which I guess is about $120. They probably work out about $80. Everything works out cheaper in the US, it seems. But it's anti-fatigue mats. The kind that have like a jigsaw type edge to them. They lock together and they're like a soft foam. Now, while they would be no use behind the bar because they would wear out really, really fast when people are up and down them for 12 hours a day, for a practice area, they're perfect. They'll take the impact out of any glassware that you drop, any glass bottles, if you're using glass rather than using a plastic Flair Co, which, if you're getting towards a competition prep, you will be using the glass because you need it to be as close as possible to what you will be doing on the stage. So these mats are invaluable. They cost next to nothing. You'll get about 6 square meters, or about 6 square yards, for about £10 or $15, $20 maybe. You know, it's no money really if you want to save the time that you would be spending sweeping up broken glass or chasing after bottles. Grab yourself some of these guys. If you can't afford the regular bounce mats, which to be honest you don't need for your practice area, yeah, grab some, see how it works for you. I think they work great. Yeah, you can get them on sale in most hardware stores. Okay, so the drinks recipe this week is the Rusty Nail. It's really good for the this time of year. It warms your cockles. It's one of those really strong, really traditional kind of drinks that don't get ordered very much nowadays in the majority of bars, but it's great. It's 1.5 ounces or 45ml of Scotch Whisky, and then 3/4 of an ounce or 22.5ml of Drambuie, which is a honey heather Scotch liqueur. Now it's basically, I mean, you can make this as big or as small as you want. It's a 2-to-1 ratio of the Scotch to the liqueur. Pour it straight into an old-fashioned glass over ice, lemon twist, very nice drink. It's strong as hell. It's not for everyone. But if you like your Scotch, if you are looking for something, excuse me, if you're looking for something to warm you up this winter time, this is a great drink that will warm you from the inside out, and it's really, really tasty, especially for me because I love Scotch. Scotch is great. So finally, the Tips for Tips segment, and this is the weekly section where, if this is your first time finding the podcast because you found me through YouTube, lovely, this is where we will basically go through one tip which you can do straight away. It doesn't take any extra effort to make you guys more money behind the bar. Now, this week's tip is to pick a shooter at the start of your night, and by a shooter I don't mean a shot, I mean a mixed shooter, whether it be something that's layered, something that's shaken and strained, served straight up. It doesn't matter to me. If you're going to be a busy night, I would recommend something shaken and strained, purely because if you get a large round, you will be able to make them much faster. So go for something like the liquid bubblegum that is featured in pretty much everything that I do. The liquid bubblegum is a drink that came from TGI Friday's menu. I'm sure it's come from somewhere else as well as there, but that's where I learnt it. It was incredibly popular when I was out in Dubai, and it's simple as anything. It's 1/2 ounce of Bailey's, 1/2 ounce of blue curacao, and 1/2 ounce of banana liqueur. All you do, combine those in your shaker and obviously multiply it up. If you're making more than one, you can get about 6 to 8 in a shaker, and pour them all in one go. Much quicker if you've got a group of people. Just give those a shake, pour them into obviously like 2-ounce shot glasses. They're going to fit perfectly with the bit of ice that melts into the drink, and they're so popular. You make a round of these and you will be making them all night, I guarantee you. And every time you offer your guest something else, you offer them something that they didn't ask for, you're helping them. You're helping to educate them about what they can have. You're not trying to pressure them into a sale. That's not what this is about. This is about offering them better service than they used to. Better service than they're getting from the bartender next to you, unless you can get your other bartenders doing it too, in which case you guys just look like the bomb and everyone is serving great drinks in your bar and serving their guests like they're kings. And the more things like this that you can do, and check back in my older podcast, there are a whole bunch of great tips that you guys can use behind the bar. The more of these that you put into your automatic service every night, the more money you're going to make, because people are not used to bartenders that serve and care as much as you will be if you are as passionate about bartending as I am. So pick up these tips, run with them. If you want to do them, brilliant, use them. Be my guest. I don't want anything for it. Just take them and run with them and be the best bartender you can be. Okay, so that's it for this week's BartenderHQ.com podcast. Thank you so much for joining me. If you need any information, anything extra that I've not covered in this video or in this podcast, depending on how you're consuming it, please leave me a comment or drop me an email. My email is david@bartenderhq.com. I'd be more than happy to give you more information about any of the topics that we've covered today. Come and join us on Facebook. I share pretty much everything that we write on the blog will end up on Facebook at some point, so you can keep up with everything there. Or join us over on bartenderhq.com. Find us on Twitter @bartenderhq. We're also on Instagram, bartenderhq pics, and a bunch of other places. Just search for Bartender HQ and you will find us. Until next time, thank you so much for joining me, and I'll talk to you next week.
Thanks for listening to the BartenderHQ.com podcast. Find us on Facebook and Twitter @BartenderHQ.